Warmly welcome everyone to Agile HR Community's meetup, the first one in 2025 actually. We are going to dive into agile transformations. We are working quite a lot with our clients who have been trained by us and going back to their organizations, or been working a bit with us and want to come back and share some learnings, some insights, and some maybe do's and don'ts, what they've learned over the years. And I am absolutely thrilled today to have Sergey with us today. He is working at JTI. I'll give you, Sergey, a couple of minutes to kind of share who you are and what you do soon. But we've been working a bit with Sergey and his team with Agile coaches, and I have learned a lot myself as well. I am absolutely honored to have you here. It's been an honor to work with you and your organization at times, and you've been guiding the Agile ship at JTI for a long time. So would you first do a quick introduction to yourself? Who are you? What have you been working with, etc., so that we can learn a bit from that first, who you are.
Thank you so much, Rina, and thank you for the opportunity. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you virtually, to meet you virtually, and I hope it's going to be a useful session because I think Rina and I, we had an exciting journey all together, bringing agility to the company, specifically to HR department, to people and culture function, and we also know some traps, yeah, and we know what works, what doesn't work. So from this perspective, I think it's not only to take, but to share back, and it's an opportunity for us to have discussion on this topic. Maybe before I start, a couple of words about JTI. JTI, or Japan Tobacco International, is one of the biggest tobacco companies. Fully international companies. We are represented in all continents, have quite a few factories around the globe. The company with Japanese roots, but purely international, with international headquarters in Geneva, and that's where I'm based. And we have such brands as Winston, Camel, and Mevius in Asia, and quite a few others. I think we are normally more known for brands than for the name of the company. And as many other businesses, it's a business in transformation. Tobacco can often be compared with car industry that goes from traditional cars into electric cars. It's the same for us because we know very well how to produce traditional cigarettes, but the industry is moving more and more towards reduced risk products, and there are innovative products such as like maybe vapes, it might be heated sticks, and many more. And it's a market which becomes much more dynamic, which is the basis for us to become more agile, and that was initial basis for us to have agile journey. Yeah. And maybe also to give you a little bit of a background of our agile journey, it started as part of business transformation, not only about agility as such. We had several streams of the transformation which was supported by McKinsey. And among streams, agility was one, but there were other questions to look at, like such as shared services, the role of HQ versus markets versus region, etc., etc. And it was McKinsey who initially brought the concept of agility, how the company can become more agile, and that's how our journey kicked off 5 years ago.
That's a very, very good story about. I really like that what you said about the product, that the product was changing and there was a big drive. That's why agility was such a strategic initiative for you to start changing how you work, because your product and market changed. Sergey, about yourself, what's your background with, so you are in P&C, you call it P&C, not HR. But you've been working also in on the software side. Was Agile familiar with you from that side?
I've been working for quite a few years in JTI. My original background, I'm Russian from St. Petersburg. You could hear it's from my accent. And I started in JTI years ago in IT actually. Yes, I was working in IT for quite a few years, not in very technical IT parts of IT, but more in internal audit, service management, this type of environments. And then I was responsible for our global IT shared service for quite a few years, so I know quite well shared services background. And then I moved to headquarters, and on IT side, I was IT business partner for various corporate functions, including HR. And that's how I jumped to HR. So I'm an example of cross-functional move. which was in 2008 or 9, if I'm not mistaken. And since then, I had quite a few years, quite a few roles in HR, talent management, talent attraction, employer brand, analytics processes. And my current role is agility. So I'm responsible enabling agility at the company level in GTI, as well as I support our people and culture leadership team to shape strategy, portfolio governance, and I'm also linked to our global shared services. It's probably from my historical shared services background.
I would probably say that your position is a dream position that I would like to have if I were working in-house in a corporation. It is around very strategic approaches to P&C. What are we doing on a high level? Where are we going? Having those KPIs, looking at the portfolio and strategy and making sure that you prioritize well, in addition to leading agility on the business side as well. So
Thanks so much.
Congrats for that work. It's really rare. It's really rare to see that kind of position for P&C leaders. So happy to have you there. Let's start with how it all started. You started with talking about that your industry is in flux, is in change. And that was about what, 7-8 years ago. You could already see that the product is changing. And McKinsey came in and did some consulting and looked into that operating models need to be adjusted and improved. Can you talk about that, how it all started? Why did you choose Agile as a key way of working? First about that a bit more. And then the next question is, how on earth did P&C or HR take the lead in leading this Agile development with quite a strong and big initiative?
Thanks. Yeah, these are good and not easy questions. Yeah. Talking about roots for agility, indeed, agility was very much triggered by business transformation, like industry transformation, and the idea that we need to do more with less and to be more innovative and to make things faster. And that's where McKinsey brought us a concept, which I think came from Netflix and some other IT companies and also banking, such as ING, the concept of so-called agile pools. Yeah. And in agility, it's called talent to value or flow to work, which means that we will create flat, large agile pools in a number of corporate functions. We have 7 functions with this agile pools, marketing and sales, research and development, legal, and HR was one of those. And the idea was that there will be good prioritization process about initiatives which are top priorities, and whatever is identified as a priority would be given to this agile pool. Yeah, and that's actually how these agile pools were created. McKinsey came up with a quite detailed blueprint. I remember it was like over 160 pages, which honestly was useful, but it was a little bit theoretical. Yeah, because for us it was like us and them. Yeah, like we were working in a traditional way. It's a company where people work for many years, and suddenly we don't have any reporting lines, like organizations are flat. It's huge, flexible, agile pool. How to operate all this? It was definitely disruption. Yeah, and that was the learning for us that we started with this like bigger vision in mind, and there was definitely some clash between current organizational culture and the new ones. And there was a question, what do we want to achieve? How this can cooperate? And GTI is one of those companies which probably doesn't like the word like revolution, and rather would go toward evolution. So how our current model could evolve and could become more modern with this new concept of agility. So over years, this model has evolved, but that was the initial drive, yes, and it came from agility, from McKinsey, but I think it also came at that age from certain hype. Yeah, because I think several years ago, everyone was talking about agility. I think now everyone is talking about AI, right? So I think in several years, we'll talk about something else. So it was a moment when agility was very much in fashion, and all those big companies would go to a conference where like a young small startup would explain how things should be done simpler, less formal, less bureaucratic, with a new culture, with more entrepreneurship. So that was the vibe of agility which was brought to us as part of transformation.
I really appreciate that you talking about this background, because that was the time when I started bringing in this into HR with our own language. and I went to these software, a lot of conferences to speak about it. And when I was sitting there as well, there were people from, for example, Spotify talking about the Spotify model. And that was very interesting to many companies to start talking about tribes and pools and chapters, etc. Lots of new language, etc. Right. And then there were certain consultancies that saw a business opportunity in this and came in and transformed big businesses with different levels of success as well. I'm hearing that you went through quite a radical start, actually. So coming in with putting people into pools, starting to prioritize and resource allocation in pools. If you think about that kind of, because quite a lot of companies are now kind of in a third wave of agile, looking into transforming their businesses, maybe not going all in with a 200-page blueprint, but starting to look at tribes, pools, cross-functional teams or squads. If you think about the learnings that you got from that time, from the people and their reactions, what was your reflections around kind of starting with this pool or squad thinking?
I think it all should start with the question why and what we want to achieve. Because I think the challenge of GTI was that maybe without reflecting a lot on why and what we want to achieve, we jumped very quickly into how. And you know, like how transformation works. You have consultants and you have a bunch of scrum masters, and suddenly your day starts with stand up, and then you have all those stickers and Kanban boards and ceremonies. And then people become overwhelmed with the ceremonies, right? And then there is a question that you have meeting for the sake of meeting. You have fully empowered team, but the team doesn't have capabilities to take decision, and then they can get completely lost. So I wouldn't say that it's all bad, yeah, but it was disruption. So I think the learning was from that period is that maybe hold on, we need to take a step back and we need to reflect what we want to achieve, yeah. So what I would say is that the concept of agile pool and this like more radical agile change was a good disruption, and it brought us capability and it brought us thinking process. There were a number of things which didn't work, such as, for example, like overall the concept of like flat 100 people pool reporting to one manager is not sustainable because this one manager would be completely lost. And I can talk about myself when I had 50 people reporting to me directly, plus I had other things to do. And then you either deal with day-to-day people issues or you deal with your senior stakeholders and how to make it all work, right? And then the question why? Yeah, what do we want to achieve? But we also learned that, for example, when you have roles which are more generic, when you have clear prioritization process, when you have teams that are empowered, when you have leaders that by default need to become servant leaders because they cannot micromanage in this setup, it brings unique capabilities. So I would say that it was a disruption, but it brought some good learnings that we adopted for the future.
I think it was very brave to jump into that. And also what I'm hearing, what happened afterwards is that you took a few steps back and you iterated and you started evolving that model, but you kind of went quite hard and all in the beginning. So that's super interesting in my opinion. What I think happens often in these situations where you bring into people into pools is the agile bubble and the previous culture, or the agile bubble, the current kind of traditional culture, they are starting to have tensions. So as you said, leadership needs to change. How you bring transparency and how you prioritize needs to change. You need to understand the capacity of that pool. So you're just not saying yes to everything and start everything, but you need to understand what are people working with, when are they releasing time from their previous project and go back to the pool so you can utilize people's time in a new project, etc. So it brings a lot of these extra governance or requirements for leadership, for governance, for meetings, for ways of how you report and follow up. And that is a big change, actually, as well. It's not just a behavioral change for people, but it's also that. Any comments on kind of that governance, leadership meetings, what you did as leadership teams?
I would maybe take slightly different angle
Yeah.
because to me the starting point is what we mean by agility. Yeah, because agile pool is only organization element. Yes, it is agile because it promotes teamwork, but I don't think agility is equals agile pool. Yeah, for me agility lays in several levels. And like one level is what I call business agility, which is about focus, which is about value, which is about prioritization, which is about removing waste, everything which is not important, right? Which is about transparency. And this is where Kanban goes. And that's one element. The second element for agility is, to me, I would call it organizational flexibility. How you could work cross-functionally, how you could collaborate, how you could create environment which makes people work in an empowered manner altogether, right? And the third one to me probably would be more individual, like how you can strive in this, how you can be more entrepreneurial, how you can learn from failure, risk taking, starting small, piloting, and then releasing things quicker. So I would say that we always need to take this business angle, like that agile offers you list like menu of different things from which you pick and choose those which are relevant in your context. And that was the learning for us, yeah. So this agile pool showed us that, okay, hold on, there are some things which work, but some things which are definitely disruptors.
Right.
In parallel, we started more and more cross-functional projects and collaborative agile ways of working, which was actually a much bigger success. So some learnings from agile pools were transferred to this agile ways of working. And now I think we're getting more maturity in understanding what what methodologies, what best practices exist, such as design thinking, such as Scrum, such as product ownership, and which elements we should apply in a smart way. If you don't want to have daily stands up, why do you need to have it, right? If you don't want to have sprints every 2 weeks and you want to make like reviews with stakeholders once a month and it's your pace, which is also fine, right? But I think you should come through this pain a little bit to become mature, to understand what you want from agility.
That's what we share very much, Sergey, is to understand and contextualize agility so that it makes sense and delivers value to you.
And that's maybe where I could tell you a little bit, because that's also important to have a right coach, to have right partner. And that's actually, Irina, I think you were super practical and instrumental because you have the same thinking, right? Because for us, the learning was that there are quite a few coaches, like that come as good psychologists, and it's nice to talk to team, but maybe it has less impact. There are quite a few coaches that come from completely different industries, let's say tech, like very startups, which is nice disruption, but it doesn't work in a more traditional manufacturing environment. So it's also a question who you can help, yeah, and how you can stay practical in all this like variety of various practices, which is called agile.
I love it. There's a lot of nonsense in agile as well if you go with a very strict approach. So yeah, fantastic. But hey, 5 years of learning, adapting, and scaling. If you think about different phases of this, you started quite all in with a pool, you started evolving that towards agile ways of working. What has happened during this journey for your agile development? And can you maybe talk about agile development as in the business side, but then also in the P&C?
I'll maybe start with the second part of the question as I go to the first one. Why like developments in P&C versus the rest of the business? I think historically agile is seen as something more technical, more like R&D startup. And in GTI, indeed, after transformation, P&C was given mandate to promote agility for other parts of the organization, which is not probably typical.
No.
And why? Because in reality, we shouldn't be over shy. In reality, HRs, P&Cs have lots of influence to this organization, because there will be many questions about leadership, many questions about performance management, many questions about organizational design and span of control. If your organization by default is super bureaucratic and you have, like one-to-one line manager reporting, by default it's difficult to be agile, yeah, because that's actually your line manager will only have one direct report. If your line manager has on average span of control of 10, by default, probably this line manager should be as more as a servant leader. That's why P&C has lots of influence in terms of culture, leadership, and the way people work. Yeah, so from this point of view, we shouldn't be shy and we shouldn't be always in the shadow, right, of other functions. In reality, P&Cs and many organizations can be ambassadors of agile ways of working, because that's a part of culture, that's a part of it's the way we work, yeah? And it comes from methodologies, but it comes from organization, from cultural element.
Can I just mention
yeah.
here, I just want to kind of jump on that, because I've said to many P&C professionals or HR professionals that you become great agile coaches Because we've been dealing with organizational development, people development, leadership development, OD, as you said, for our whole careers. Now it's just another lens. It's that agile lens, bringing in how should we work and why and what the value is. So we actually become quite good agile coaches out there in the business. So that could be something that if you are here in HR and you're looking for ways to move towards the business to work, that could be an avenue that could be quite interesting.
I think so. I think it's also an opportunity for HR, for PNC to step in a little bit and to really show like business partnership outside traditional HR processes, because you need them to jump into projects. You need to understand why this is important. You need to ask questions about prioritization, and you can indeed coach other functions how they should work, and they will be grateful to you. And that's what we see, yeah, because for us it's really cross-functional. We have around like 1,000 or 2,000. I already lost like practitioners. We have quite a few like knowledge holders that probably are more experienced than we are on PNC side, but there is in the community, and this community is truly cross-functional, and that's, I think it's nice for PNC to be facilitator of that community. Yeah.
Super. If you speak about the business side of it, do you see an evolution there as well? That some businesses are moving faster and into another model, and some are kind of sticking with the agile ways of working and maybe the mindset. What are you seeing?
I think it all depends on their specific business needs. Of course, there will be leaders who are more project agile, and that's where it will be faster. Yes, there are a little bit leaders more on the traditional side, but if you don't make revolution, and if you really try to understand their pain points, which also comes from agile element, right? You start from pain point, and then you see which elements of agility can address their pain points, then they really buy into this. And these points might be different. For example, in our global supply chains, they're super pro-agile, yes, and they talk much about empowerment of people, even empowerment of production people, projects run in an agile way, but also a lot of lean, yeah, because they need to talk about like lean process, manufacturing processes, and that's where lean agile comes to the picture. If you talk about other functions, there are many functions that need to work cross-functionally. Yeah, for example, marketing together with research and development, together probably with some technical functions. So how these cross-functional teams could work? They might be maybe less about transparency of processes, but more about collaborative ways of working. Yes, so you will see lots of practices related to those cross-functional projects. And what I observe in GTI is that there is different focus in different parts of the organization, and these are like mushrooms that start working, like in functions, but also in the regions, because regions in GTI set up, they have the businesses to manage, and they want to have also regional projects. Yeah, for example, bringing people from different markets and focusing on them what regions believes is a priority. And there is also a big element of talent development, because it's also an opportunity for people to work cross-functionally. And I see that there is more interest for us to have certain marketplaces and how people could raise their hands and become visible at regional level or functional level.
More kind of skills-based and project-based work when you've got this transparency of the projects going on.
For me, it's a stepping stone towards this, because it creates demand, and then there will be solutions related to skills, related to marketplaces, yeah, which address how these people can identify it and what processes are built around it.
You know what makes me really happy when you talk about this? It is that you've kind of moved away from institutionalized agile towards it's just being a way of delivering value. And you said there are different ways of doing that, which is fine. So as long as it delivers value and it helps the teams be great together, then go and do and take what makes sense for you. So that's exactly where we want to take it. Certain elements of agility and certain elements of the governance model might be shared. I'm not sure, do you have some of those shared governance principles or any elements that you say everybody should do this and this, for example, retrospectives, or is there something that comes to your mind that is something that you recommend kind of centrally that everybody does?
We do. We've identified certain areas which we believe should be promoted, not as must-have, but a kind of like red threads that people should know and they should leverage as much as possible. One of them is about outcome-based goals and focus on actually what we want to achieve. Yeah, before we start a project, you really discuss what value you want to have common narrative, making sure that we speak the same language, that we all understand exactly what we want to achieve. Yeah. and ideally it should be linked to outcome, because the idea is not to implement, like another L&D solution, but the idea is to make sure that your employees get the right knowledge, and it might be done either via solution or via something else. Yeah, because solution is more like output, and the knowledge is outcome. The second notion is about prioritization, which we really try to promote. Yeah, so portfolios and priorities, making sure that we understand that this is global must-have, this is more like art, this is more like a pilot, this is urgent, this is less urgent, and there are different ways of having those discussions, but that's what we try to promote. Retrospectives, so how teams could look back the way they work and improve things. We also see that Kanban, for those organizations and part of the organizations that work in like process and day-to-day tasks, yeah, like transparency of work, Kanban, and also removing things which are probably less important, prioritizing like making things like more urgent, less urgent is something which we try to promote. And also, we give more guidelines for projects. Yeah, we don't want to say that all projects should be run in agile way, because there are some projects which are waterfall by default. Like if you want to replace technical SAP, like from one version to another, probably it's less creative. It just needs to be done within budget and time frames. But some elements of agility might still be applied, right? Such as retrospective, such as like regular discussions, stakeholder reviews. But there might be some projects which are where outcome is not known. You need to collaborate with customer on a regular basis. You need to evolve as you progress. And for those projects, we recommend agile ways. Yeah. So for projects which are iterative by nature and exploratory, we also try to experiment with scrums, and that's what we promote. And our agile portfolio of trainings like learning capability buildings, and we also work with quite a few agile coaches. We focus on those elements which I have mentioned. So we don't want to say that some elements should be 100% like mandatory like across organization, but we also need to stay focused. So identify certain areas which we really try to see in the organization.
I think this is something that many people here can pick up on. You mentioned very core elements of Agile, which you're promoting specifically, but you're not making them mandatory. So I'm just going to mention them once more so people can pick up on them. Outcome-driven goals, super important. Specifically in P&C, we usually just kind of talk about what we're doing, so activities, rather than what are we aiming to get done and delivered, and what's the outcome, what's the KPI, how are we measuring that we're ready. So really nice pick there. The other one was prioritization. That is the pain point for most P&C teams globally who I'm working with.
Because everything is important, right?
Yeah, exactly. It is around what truly matters, what can we do with the capacity and budget that we have. And sometimes also that hard work of saying no or delaying things rather than starting everything and just praying that things will be done. Third, retrospectives is why I started with Agile myself. Love them, absolutely. They are helping any team become better and really listen to each other and think about how can we improve our ways of working. Then the transparency that comes with Kanbans and Agile ways of working. I'd like to kind of double click on that a little bit. How scary do you think transparency of work is for P&C folks? Sergey, is it scary? Is it okay? Are they open to do that? What are your reflections and experiences?
To me, it's normal change management process, because those people who never tried it, they would be scared, and it's a new tool, and there will be suspicion like why I need to be super transparent and share like what I do with others. But once people start doing this, and they use Kanban as part of the teamwork, they don't want to go back. So
Yeah.
I see, for example, our business partners, they now operate in small teams or squads, yeah, like 5, 6 people supporting certain corporate functions, and they all use Kanban, because for them it's easy, because actually they have backlog of things to be done. They see who's working on what. If some person like got sick, or somebody went on vacation, somebody is busy and something needs to be picked up, then some other team members can take it and do it. So basically, it's a kind of self-organized team. It's up to them to see how they handle those things, and they find it practical for themselves. So we're not pushing this any longer. It's their tool. They know how to use it, and if they don't want to use it, they're welcome not to use it. But from what I see, all those teams they still keep on using it.
That's one thing
And
that
that's
is quite remarkable when we start with new agile teams is just bringing that transparency in, what everybody are working on, what's going on, what's cooking, who's working with what. That brings so much more efficiencies because you don't have to go email back and forth. You can see it in one board. That's it, and you get together by the board and talk about what's to do next. So that's really something that I appreciate when we start up new teams is how they find that efficiency with these boards. It's quite remarkable.
yeah. I would probably be more concerned. I mean, I would be less concerned that some people don't do work and it becomes visible through Kanban, because to be honest, we know this anyway, right? Even without Kanban, I'm already suspicious that some team members might be less effective than others. I would see more impact challenging some things which people do but which might be less effective. Why do we do it? Why we need it? Because then you take a card and you believe it's important for you, but your team members might challenge whether it's required at all, which I think is a nice discussion because it's a question back to value. Why do we do it?
Yes, correct. And that's something which I want to kind of highlight here. If you're an agilist, you're trying not to do things. You don't want to do things that are not adding value. And that's a welcome challenge in the team as well, to just challenge that. Hey, can we do this in a better way? Or should this be done at all? Or should it be done later and not now? So very good picks there. When you're P&C or HR is at the forefront of Agile, what would be your top three kind of learnings or do's when you're leading agility in the organization? What would be important for recommendations for P&C for professionals, and what maybe three don'ts?
Maybe what we are proud of is the prioritization that we have, and I think it's many thanks to you, Serena, because we tried it several times, but I think you brought it. You was the one who brought it for second or third time, actually, in an effective way. We have a process by PNC leadership team when we sit together, like not too often, or like 3 times a year, and we review what what projects we have in the pipeline, what we have in the backlog, what nice to haves we have, and from this we have discussion all together what we believe should be must have priorities, what should be a la carte, and what should be pilot, and the rest goes outside of the goes in the backlog.
Ooh, I like
And
a la carte. Did you
yeah,
hear that? So what are must-haves? What are a la carte? So very specific, unique, tailored, right? Is that
and also for locations, a la carte might be available, but locations take them if they need.
it's
It's not
pull.
mandatory.
They can pull it, right?
It's a pool. It's almost like a solution which we can develop, but it's up to you to use or not, right?
Nice.
And then the third one is lab, which is a small pilot experiment, is proof of concept. We don't have commitment that we'll launch it globally, yeah, but let's see, let's test and try, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Yeah, so let's start small, and
Love
we can work on this. Yeah, and what we also do, all those priorities we now link clearly to our strategy and to company strategy. Yeah, so we have those initiatives which are global must have, which because they support corporate strategies from different angles, right? And this is a la carte because they support corporate strategies. So we try to remove things which are less important, right?
Yeah, it's getting
Yeah,
rid of those kind of people, P&C professionals or HR professionals are really good at kind of coming up with their pet projects, something that they think is important and something that is nice to do. But when you make this transparent, you might say, hey, you know, Jack, right now that's an interesting project and seems interesting, but here is the list of what we should be actually doing that leads towards our strategy. So it's maybe easier also to delay or not start these pet projects, having that in place.
yeah. Sometimes it upsets people if we completely kill those pet projects. So what we would say, we take it slightly softer. We say that if you have capacity and time and you can work on your pet projects, you can still do it. But let's also be clear about positioning that it's not a priority. It shouldn't overwhelm markets, And I mean, if you make it and people use it, fine, absolutely, yeah. But let's be clear, what is a priority for us?
Super. What else do you recommend? So portfolio and prioritization, something else that is really in the heart of, make sure to do this for the PNC people listening today.
I think we're much more clear on this definition of value. What we want to achieve, why, yeah, like what is the ultimate outcome of this project? What we want to do. So that's another element which works well. Yeah. Maybe we are not super perfect working collaboratively, but it's definitely a focus area for us. So how we could work between different parts of PNC organizations, between PNC and other functions. So how this environment could be created. So that's another element which we always like pay attention to and we try to improve. Yeah, even though it's difficult. So it's a question a little bit like about like my objective versus our objective. Yeah. So how you could things, how you can look more globally at what you do. And
And
that's
you
actually where prioritization also helps, because if you have clear standards or clear priorities, it also helps identify why you do this, right? And how it supports bigger picture.
And you're such a big organization as well, so there is definitely some contextual kind of points regarding collaboration and across silos and across teams. What would you say, watch out for? So something that you've learned, I can share a few of my watch outs for as well, when you start bringing agility into PNC specifically.
I would say that you need to have good capability building plan. Yeah, because it all starts that you need to know methods, you need to know tools. Yeah, you need to know design thinking, you need to know Scrum, you need to know Kanban, you need to know product vision and product ownership part, right? Because I think it all starts with your understanding of what Agile can offer. I would invest in good training. I would invest in good partners with like agile coaches that can help you, and those people who really come through agile transformation, not on paper but in the industry which is similar to yours, because we shouldn't ruin company culture. Companies are different, right? And the way people work are also different. So I think it's also good to remember about this. To me, the good coach should be like a doctor. He or she makes it a little bit uncomfortable for you, but not too painful that like you say, no, it's enough. But you try, and then actually once you get used, it becomes good. Or maybe like a sports coach, yeah, because a good sports coach would also like make it a little bit uncomfortable for you. But once your muscles get used to this, it becomes natural way for you to do some sports and exercise. What not to do, probably not to be over obsessed with ceremonies and scrums and agile by the book. I think it's good to know, but let's be practical. Yes, to me, good example was empowered teams. When suddenly you put all pressure on the team and team gets completely lost and they don't know actually how to take decisions, they don't have maturity, they don't have experience, and suddenly it's not the team is happy as normally team would supposed to be, but the team is just like completely lost. So that's a good example to avoid. So always think why and what you want to achieve. So
Excellent.
that's on those topics, and to be very pragmatic, because I think agility varies variety of methods and tools, and even within one companies it might be different angles. Yeah, like some pain points would be too much work and more focus on prioritization and value. In some other functions, it's less collaboration and more like retrospectives. In some other parts of organization, maybe servant leadership and leaders that should really empower people. I think you need to watch what the pain point is and how agility can address those pain.
I've got a few ones that I have as well regarding kind of no-goes. First of all is I come across people who think that agile deliveries, if you work in an agile squad or project or team, whatever you want to call it, is something that you do on top of your 100% job because it's agile. It's somehow lightweight, and I don't know how they think about this. So I just wanted to mention that no, if you work in an agile squad, you need to have capacity to actually work in that way. If we work with agility, yeah, we can work with agility with a small a, with Kanbans and cross-functional teams and iterations, but we can't really work in a speedy fashion in getting things done with a proper focus if we don't have that capacity. So sometimes when I meet people and say, we're going to set up a squad, we need at least 50, I usually say I need at least 50% of capacity from them to work in a kind of very efficient, agile way. And some people say, oh, but we can participate in a few meetings every week. That's not agile teamwork. It's more like a stakeholder participating in the meetings. So that's one thing which I kind of want to highlight is we will need capacity for these teams, just as any project team needs capacity. The second is that self-organization point, which you said. Many agile coaches build on. We need to move towards self-organizing principles and teams that lead their own work, etc. But it has to be a two-way street where we are working with the teams to say, what can you decide on yourselves? What do you feel comfortable in deciding yourselves? And where do you need help? So that needs to be there so that it doesn't kind of feel like we're throwing a team in cold water and saying, swim, now you're doing this, you're self-organized. That's not how we want to approach it.
Fully agree. I think management is not for nothing, right? I mean, management is appointed to take certain decisions. And I would say in agile setup, probably management would set the frame and would give team space to operate within this frame, but the frame should be set up, yeah.
Yeah, and I love what you said about upskilling. I can just see that the places where they've done a proper upskilling, they almost start working this way automatically afterwards. You don't have to push, you don't have to do change management. It is like, oh, okay, they've learned it, they make sense out of it, and they start contextualizing it to their
Yeah. For us, honestly, ultimate objective would be that agile disappears as such, and we even try to remove more and more the word agile. We call it collaborative ways of working, or just like ways of working, or the way we work, because that's ultimate objective, to make sure that it becomes business as usual, but it requires some time and effort, yeah, behind. And you say initially probably need this 50% of capacity to learn, to try new things, and probably it's lost productivity because then actually you will catch it up, but not immediately. It's a learning curve.
super.
And maybe I could also mention that you need to have leadership, because that's probably what I forgot to say earlier. We were lucky that as part of transformation, we had sponsorship by the board, by our executive committee, and we still have our executive committee steer call. We don't meet so often, but maybe twice a year. But there is always support. So
Agile
if something needs to be exactly agile circle, and you need to have leadership, because if nobody supports this at team level, it's very difficult to navigate. You still need to have leadership engagement.
Yeah, because it still connects to certain governance models. It still connects to operating systematic structures that we have in the organization. If we don't have those stakeholders on board, it's difficult to work in a more agile way or bring customers in and co-create with you. So again, we have a few questions that I'm going to pick up. But first of all, can you give me a practical example of a product or a deliverable that your P&C team has delivered through an agile way of working, which was successful?
Maybe agile for the sake of agile, we introduced portfolio management and prioritization process with principles how leadership team should run it, what should be the cadence, what should be the portfolio, what should be classification of projects, how this meeting should run. So basically, all this comes from agile. It made it itself as an agile project. Yeah. Another element is that, for example, once we were making quite a few projects, I can use several ones. One is about like inspirational, like when employees can it's called Inspired by You. It's like engagement tool when people can support each other and like, so like I would vote for Rina because Rina, she's like most strategic colleague I have ever seen, right? So it's a kind of like motivation tool at the level of employees. So we designed this program and implemented this program through Scrum and through agile ways of working. We also had example, which honestly took long, but it was implemented of cross-functional project to make a platform and process behind for headcount and cost planning and reporting. And it makes it difficult because, you know, like in big organization, all this headcount and cost, they're always between HR and finance, and there is IT with a technical platform. So how things can work together. So those elements, yeah.
Workforce planning kind of an enabler for that. Super.
And I wouldn't say that agile would completely change, you know, like would change the project being different, but a different way of implementation, and it did work for us.
Super, thank you. We have a question. Lisa saying, I'm a HR director currently leading a large-scale agile operating model implementation for fintech, insurance and banking. 5,000 people, around 100 squads aligned to customer outcomes. We've set up a new operating model and have moved to a new way of working. How do we best sell the benefits of agile apart from career adjacent skills, flow of work? What was the most effective means of benefits realization what shifted the dial, if you think about the scaling and business side?
I wouldn't have silver bullet for all situations. All companies are different. For us, I see the biggest discussion point is about facilitating collaborative ways of working. So how people can more effectively collaborate from different departments in cross-functional projects. That's we even don't need to sell it because they start working and then they finish projects, then they run a retrospective, and from this they make examples what works, what doesn't work, and they start discussion. Look, with everything that works, we want to stretch it further to other projects, and it's almost like a snowball. So it starts small, and then actually based on success of one project, they want to have another one, and then another one, and then another one, and that's what we see. Do we have specific return on investment? Probably we don't, to be honest. Yeah, and it's very difficult to measure, right? How would you measure this project which was delivered in 6 months in agile versus other project which would be delivered in waterfall way? Because it was not delivered; it was delivered already in agile way. How would you compare, right? So
we should have a scientific approach to set up the same project in a waterfall way, in an agile way.
If it had been implemented in different way, what it would have, it would be all this unreal conditional, yeah, like in English. But what reality would be that if people work in that environment and they feel happy and they feel satisfied and there is success of the project and satisfaction of team members and stakeholders, then naturally they become promoters of agility.
What I see happening on scale, often answering Lisa, is first of all, waterfall sometimes doesn't make sense. So quite many people, when they learn about agile and they have an explicit conversation about, should we do a hybrid model? Is there some parts which need to be waterfall, like certifications to an EU regulator? You can't really send documents there bite-sized. You need to have everything, done for that certification to land. Maybe there's a hybrid approach, but the conversation about explicitly talking about what should we work on in an agile way and what in a waterfall way, because waterfall sometimes doesn't make sense and agile sometimes doesn't make sense. The second is that the customer centricity. I think that is one thing that really drives interest in working this way, that you should get feedback from that end-to-end chain and customers. And sometimes that's the first time when folks in R&D or folks in software development or folks in product actually hear and speak with the end customers. What are their needs? What are their real goals? It's much more nicer to build your products because you can see the end result and understand what the needs are. Then third is, I think it is a very modern, welcome, inclusive way of working if you're setting up agile teams well. It is around that transparency, that inclusion, using everybody's brains, not having a micromanager leader there to manage your work, but to really start bringing that potential into work. So I would probably look into kind of team health as well and start comparing who have been working with great coaches in agile maturity versus teams maybe who haven't. And that can be then even connected to, if we go a bit further, to absence rates, to churn rates, etc. So costs like that. As for Sergey, can you give one or two examples of problem statements that P&C teams worked on and saw great outcomes in a time-bound way?
I remember one problem statement, for example, that our problem is that newcomers that join our headquarters in Geneva, they get lost, and there is no specific process how we can onboard them, and we're not sure if they're effective in the first 3 months of working. So there was a problem statement which we worked on, is basically how to come up with process, like set of practices, platform, to help them on board quicker, as quick as possible, and as effective as possible, so that they could start delivering sooner than later.
Oh, onboarding is a great project anywhere in whatever company to start working in an agile way, and getting those people who you recently onboarded to join to actually co-create that process and way of working with you. I think that here is one last question. If you were starting Agile HR today, what's the one thing you would do differently?
It's a good one. I would pay more attention to actual problems we want to solve, and I would start with clear question why. Why? What do we want to achieve? Why we do it, rather than how. I think our initial trap was that with this like big McKinsey blueprint, we jumped very quickly on how with all this like stands up and scrums and big agile pools without clear understanding what we want to achieve and what problems we are solving. And I think that was a little bit overreaction, and this created this negative vibe to agility, right? And I think it's now I would do things differently. I would be more careful actually what I want to achieve, why, and then how specific agile tools would start. And I would start maybe small by small. We don't need to have big bang. Let's use prioritization. Let's use retrospectives. Let's create certain teams and let's make some experiments. Starting small and again, going more into evolutionary rather than revolutionary model. I'm afraid now of like large agile transformation, 1,000 people, because we see growing number of examples where at the end it fails, right? Because something doesn't work, because people were so much obsessed with these big transformations that they didn't grab the essence what they want to achieve. So that's what I will do different.
Being realistic and understanding why you're doing this goal, and then taking stepwise. I love that evolution instead of revolution that you're saying. That's a very agile way of approaching organizational development as well, is to scale what works and test and learn and really do that. My heartfelt thank you for you, Sergey, for joining us for this hour to share your experiences from 5 years of
My
Agile PNC. You're one of the longest standing Agile transformation leaders in the world that I know of. 5 years is
I'm
long.
not sure it helps, yeah, but thank you so much and thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, like we have been good partners in GTI.
Was lovely to have you here, and let's if anybody has any further questions or anything, you can be in touch with us. Thank you so much, Sergey, and everyone else for spending some time with us.
Thank you for joining also, and thanks for the questions.
Thank you, and don't be a stranger. We're
Cheers.
here if you want to reach out for any support. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.